Thank you and good afternoon. It's always a very real privilege, even if somewhat challenging, to follow Jean-Louis Boncel on the platform. He's such an inspiring and insightful speaker. But it's a very real privilege to be part of this program and to visit you, especially at this particularly beautiful time of the year here. And so I appreciate this opportunity to talk about how cooperatives can contribute to creating sustainable communities. I'd like to start by stressing the urgency of this topic. The time to act on sustainability is now and not in the future. I have some summary remarks that are in the program in front of you, and I'm going to follow that outline, but I'm going to expand on those topics a bit. And I want to start by reminding you that it was on October 31st, 2011, at the headquarters of the United Nations in New York City, that the International Year of Cooperatives was launched. So we tend to think of the international years as running during a calendar year. But in fact, that's not quite true. So 2012 was the Year of Cooperatives, 2014, of course, the Year of Family Farming, 2015, this year, is the International Year of Soil. But in fact, those years tend to be launched not on January 1st, but on some date that coincides with a meeting of the General Assembly. So also on that same day, October 31st, 2011, the United Nations at their headquarters in New York announced the birth of the 7 billionth member of the human race. Of course, we don't follow every birth around the world and count them, but they have a global level estimates on these things, and they took the symbolism of that day to announce that we have now reached 7 billion individuals living in the world. And I mention this convergence because it signifies both the urgency for sustainability and also the potential for a way forward through the cooperative model. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, in his remarks that day, he said, "Alarm bells are ringing," and he spoke of growing economic uncertainty and mounting inequality. But he said that we could be 7 billion strong by working in solidarity for a better world for all. And that message coincided with the theme for the International Year of Cooperatives, that cooperative enterprises build a better world. The President of the UN General Assembly spoke that day too, and he emphasized the need to rethink the approach to sustainable development. So the International Cooperative Alliance took that call to action very seriously. And we recognize that cooperatives have been doing just that, building a better world, since our founding at the middle of the 19th century. But we also felt a renewed sense of urgency during the International Year. And so at the very outset, we decided that we didn't want to just celebrate the year and look back at the end of it at the events we had, but we wanted to leverage it for a cooperative decade to really have a longer-term strategy. And we ended up creating a blueprint for a cooperative decade that our members, it's orange actually, but it's a blueprint, we call it, that our members approved at the close of the International Year on October 31st, 2012 in Manchester, UK. We identified 5 key areas in the blueprint where we feel that we need game-changing strategies if the cooperative is really to operate at a much higher level in the global economy. The first 2 are differentiators: participation and sustainability. These are areas where we think the cooperative model is frankly better. We think we are the most participatory model of enterprise. And this is at a time when people want to have a greater voice. They feel disconnected from the economic models, the social models that are dominating their lives. And we think the cooperative has a very strong message in that space. Second, we want to differentiate cooperators around sustainability. We want to be the enterprise model that is the most associated with the idea of sustainability, with sustainable practices. So these two of the five are differentiators. The others are identity. We think we need to build a shared global identity, a legal framework, and capital. We need a reliable stream of cooperative capital that doesn't jeopardize member ownership. And there's a lot more in each of these five areas in the blueprint. You can look at it on our website, ica.coop. It's there in a number of languages, including Japanese. So if you haven't looked at it, please do that at some point. So we believe if we can be successful in achieving significant progress in these five areas, that we will then become the model that is preferred by people, and we can become, by the end of this decade, the fastest growing model of enterprise in the world. That's the vision in the blueprint. So when we talk about sustainability, which is the only one of the five areas that I'm really going to speak about today, what do we mean? It's a buzzword. It's used by the corporate world. Corporations wrap it around their brand like a cloak of respectability. And it's not clear that we're always meaning the same thing when we use it. So in order to answer that question of what sustainability means to us, what it should mean, let me go back again to 2012, which was a watershed year in many ways for the cooperative model. Because 2012, in addition to being the International Year of Cooperatives, and in addition to marking the 7 billionth human being, 2012 was also the occurrence of something called Rio Plus 20, which was a United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development that was held in Rio de Janeiro. And it was held 20 years after the significant Earth Summit that was held in 1992. And the International Cooperative Alliance participated in Rio Plus 20 as we had 20 years earlier in the Earth Summit. And we were very pleased to see in the outcome document at Rio the recognition of cooperatives as central to sustainable development. In particular, in contributing to social inclusion and poverty reduction, in calls for the development of strong agricultural cooperatives as a means of increasing sustainable agricultural production. And the outcome document also acknowledged the cooperative role in decent work and job creation. So we were recognized in three key areas at Rio. But I mentioned Rio Plus 20 here because it was the original Rio conference 20 years earlier, that so-called Earth Summit, where sustainable development was elegantly defined in what's become a classic definition. Development which meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So development which meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And the Earth Summit, in spite of the suggestion of that term, recognized that sustainability is not just environmental. It was very clear that there are connections between economic issues, social issues, and the environmental issues. And that's the definition that the cooperative movement has adopted. So 3 years after the Earth Summit, in 1995, the members of the International Cooperative Alliance met in Manchester, UK, and we adopted there the third iteration of the cooperative statement, of the Statement on Cooperative Identity, including the 7 cooperative principles and values. And it's that iteration, that statement, that is the current one. And it's been enshrined in Recommendation 193 at the International Labor Organization, in United Nations guidelines on creating an environment for the creation of cooperatives. It's enshrined in the domestic legislation of a number of countries. And it was at that time, in 1995, that a seventh principle was added. Cooperatives work for the sustainable development of their communities through policies approved by their members. Now, Jean-Louis mentioned that the Principals Committee of the Board, which he chairs, is now drafting guidance notes to help expand on the principles. Because they've been enshrined after a lot of hard work in important global documents, we don't want to change them too often because there'll be distance then between these documents. So instead, we're working to really interpret them, keep them fresh, help ensure that they are relevant through the guidance notes that Jean-Louis and his committee are working on. And I can draw on those, even though they're still in draft form, for some ideas and thoughts I want to share with you today. In particular, you'll see when they're shared in a few weeks for comment, and then they'll be coming to the members for approval in Turkey at our General Assembly in November. You'll see that they really point out the special relationship that cooperatives have with their communities. And it's a relationship that goes beyond simple business economics, because cooperatives are very much rooted in those communities. Their success is dependent on their ability to support the development of their communities. They have inherited traditions that are concerned about the health and the well-being of individuals in those communities. And it's from these deep roots of concern, the concern for the immediate local communities that gave birth to them, it's from that the cooperative movement's wider concerns around national, regional, global development has grown. So we believe that cooperatives are sustainable by design. There's something intrinsic in how they're structured and how they're formed by the community, in the responsibility to the community. There's something intrinsic that makes them sustainable by nature. They optimize outcomes. They don't maximize a single outcome. They manage to balance social issues, economic issues. They're not, and environmental issues. They're not solely focused on maximizing profit, for example. They create livelihoods, but they recognize the importance of balancing that with these other issues. So when cooperatives talk about sustainability, they talk about reduction of poverty, good governance of business, evolution of local and national structures that are free from corruption, the creation of decent local jobs, the use of local products and services, employment that's free from discrimination. All of these are tied up into the values through which cooperatives operate. So when we created the blueprint, we recognized that sustainability has to be one of the areas that we emphasize, and that we make part of our story to the public that we are sustainable by nature. But we had to start by saying, how authentic is that? Because if we can't demonstrate that, then we won't be able to be successful in making that case. So we have a number of initiatives that we've launched under the blueprint. And in this area of sustainability, we started with a sustainability scan. It's not an exhaustive survey, but it's a scan across the horizon to look at how are cooperatives actually acting in sustainability. What are they actually doing? How legitimate is our claim that we're the most sustainable model by design? And that scan also is on our website. And it showed that cooperatives are very focused on sustainability, that we're particularly focused on social aspects of sustainability. And we demonstrated this, we determined this by looking at a crowdsourcing tool we had created to examine how cooperatives are speaking about sustainability. And then we looked at annual reports and sustainability reports to get, a quick top-level assessment. This was the starting point. What it also allowed us to do is to identify a number of cooperatives that are leading in sustainability. And I've mentioned some of them in the summary. Saikatsu Club Consumers Cooperative here in Japan, Union Cab in the United States, the New Internationalist, a worker cooperative in the UK that reports on world poverty and inequality, Van City Credit Union in Canada. All of these had strong, demonstrated excellence in sustainability. And so as a second step, we invited a number of these cooperatives to form a sustainability advisory group so that we have frontline cooperatives who are demonstrating their commitment to this, who are helping us to shape what we should do next. And they're helping to create the tools and the measurements so that we can share those with other cooperatives. The advisory group is recommending that we develop a framework that is based on cooperative values that will help cooperatives measure their sustainability. And that we also recognize that there are reporting mechanisms out there like the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, and others that we shouldn't distance ourselves from. And we should demonstrate through these accepted tools that we also measure up well. And that is consistent with our efforts not to just evaluate ourselves, but to make sure that we are getting independent third parties to also assess how we're doing and give us feedback. One example of that is the Corporate Knights, which is a Canadian organization that ranks companies on their sustainability practice. And we invited them to look at cooperatives and tell us how they think we're doing. And they reported last October in the Corporate Knights magazine on the 20 most sustainable financial cooperatives in the world. The goal and the strategy around sustainability is not a mere statement of intent. This is not something we're going to do in the future. We believe that we already have a very strong track record, but we want to develop it further. Some examples of what we're already seeing are farmers who are organized in cooperatives, especially smallholder and family farmers around the world, who are strengthening their position in the markets, increasing efficiency, contributing to food security, nutrition every day. There is a project in Senegal by the National Cooperative Business Association that has managed to increase income of farmers by 250%, and they've reduced underweight children by 35%, and they provide food security for 1 million people. And we can find examples like that all around the world. The work of IFCO, the Indian Farmers Fertilizer Cooperative, is another example of what we're seeing in this area. We produce a World Cooperative Monitor every year that ranks the largest cooperatives. And Japanese cooperatives are usually at the top of that. 4 out of the top 10 are from Japan. When, however, you look at cooperatives relative to the GDP of their country, which we've now started to rank in the monitor, so you look at the turnover of the cooperative and you compare that to the size of their national economy, when you look at that kind of a ranking, IFCO is actually the largest cooperative in the world. It's quite a ways down on the raw ranking, but when you look at their size relative to the economy of India, which we think gives an interesting impact that cooperatives are having in their own economies, then IFCO is at the top of the list. They have been very active in getting farmers to be more organic, and they're really using now the UN International Year of Soil to really ramp up that program. But there are also examples in many other areas. In employment, Sacopa, our worker cooperative sector, produced a report last year that showed that 250 million people organized their livelihood through cooperatives. We used to think that number was 100 million. Now we have much better research that shows it's closer to 250 million. 225 million of those are self-employed producers, mainly in agriculture. They may not identify themselves first as a cooperative. They may be a farmer, they may be in some other field, but they've organized themselves so that their livelihood is largely through a cooperative. And then 25 million are employees. There is what we call a virtuous circle of cooperative enterprise, where the seventh principle comes into play, and that the sustainability practices that the cooperatives engage in support the community, and that in turn is working to support the cooperative. We're now working to take that global. It's not just the local communities, it's also global. And we work, as you may know, with the United Nations, with the International Labor Organization, with the Food and Agriculture Organization, and we have done that since their founding, and we've had consultative status with the UN since its founding in 1946. We're working now to take that to where we see increasing influence. For example, the G20, we've identified as an area where we have to have increasing understanding of the cooperative model. And so last year, when they met in Australia, we were able to get a member of a cooperative onto the B20, which is the business advisory group, for the first time. This year, as the G20 meets in Turkey, we've managed to get 15 members of cooperatives into the six task forces that the B20 has. So we're increasing the level of influence we have in these organizations. We're making sure that the cooperative story is heard. We don't believe that there's any advantage in trying to stay under the radar, in trying to be hidden. We think we're going to have increasing challenges because we're successful. Every time we see demutualization efforts, we believe it's because of the success and the wealth that is in cooperatives that others envy. And so we think the best way to address that is by getting out the cooperative story. It was 120 years ago this year, August 19th, 1895, when leaders came together from around the world to form the International Cooperative Alliance. And they had a vision that the cooperative model could be an instrument to create livelihoods and to foster what today we would call social justice. We've grown since that time to have members in 100 countries. We know that 250 million people make their livelihood through cooperatives. We know that the 300 largest cooperatives have annual turnover over $2 trillion US. We know that there are something like 1 billion cooperatives or cooperators in the world. And we know that the cooperative is an engine for sustainable development. We also know that there are those who have a different vision and who want to maximize their own gain and who see the cooperative as an obstacle to their own objectives. And we need to ensure that we take our story to the people and that the public fully understands the benefit of the cooperative model. Thank you.